welcome. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. So good of you all to join us this morning for a session on building a sustainable touring model for the Middle East. I'm sitting here with a totally fascinating guy, truly fascinating guy. I've had the honor of already speaking to him for a number of hours, and I would actually wish that for all of you. But we'll get to in the next 45 minutes, we'll get to a lot of really interesting points, I think. This guy's name is Debru. I think Belgian originally, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now based in Uganda. And the founder of Nyege Nyege. And we're going to go into a lot of what he's done in creating this kind of regional and now international, very successful model for young and inspiring artists, and also more established. Derek, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you all for making it to this talk. I hope it's going to be interesting for you. Thank you, XP, for inviting me. So my name is Derek. I'm based in Uganda for the last 12 years, and in 2014, I started together with artists from East Africa, from Uganda, to build a collective that was aimed at promoting East African culture and music, emerging music, throughout the world, as well as creating economic livelihoods for these artists. So as a sort of disclaimer, our music is not, let me say, mainstream commercial music. So we focus on all sorts of genres of music, but usually the music that did not get to play on the radio or that did not get the sort of spotlight it deserved. And I felt that when I was there was a lot of talent, but this talent did not know where to perform, did not always have access to tools of production, and we needed to close the gap in order to create opportunities for them and eventually a thriving economic system in which they could tap into. So today, over the last 5 years, we've released about 60 albums. In the last 4 months, we toured about 70 shows in Europe, mostly, making an income of about $150,000 for about 15 different acts. And our artists, we've seen them go from learning music to now soundtracking Burberry fashion shows and Johnny Walker commercials and playing like at major music festivals. We also curate stages at international music festivals, and we've done this in an organic manner. So bit by bit, trying to figure out where were the gaps, how could we close them, and building on a sort of growing network, and of course an interest in the music that we make. So a lot of our music is featured in music publications like The Fader or Pitchfork or Wire, etc. So how our system works.
So before you go into how the system works, tell us a little bit of where it's, and I'll remember this question for how the system works later, but yeah. Tell us a little bit about where it all started.
So it started in 2014. We were running a film school, and every Wednesday we would have these film screenings, and we would organize parties after the film screenings. And the parties started to attract a lot of young people that didn't feel that they were getting spaces that they were comfortable in other space, in the rest of the city, be it for the music they played, or the way they expressed themselves, or their identity, etc., etc. So there's a community that built around this, and a lot of musicians, a lot of young people that wanted to learn music. So we rented out this big house and set up a studio, and there we basically started to run workshops, invite also international artists to come and give workshops, initiate like collaborations, and slowly by slowly we managed to sort of grow talents. And then basically we have this house that is a bit the lab, I can say, that is open to artists from all over the region. And the festival was built as the party started to grow. We started a festival that was built to showcase music from our region to the people locally, but also an international audience. And today, the last edition in 2019, we had about 40 festival programmers, journalists, agents, people basically talent scouts to come. We host about 300 artists throughout 4 days, and we had about 13,000 people at the festival. And then we also have 2 record labels on which we can promote the music of the artist, and usually together with PR and digital communication, we're able to sort of build careers. And now we also have a booking agency, which was also very important, and we're going to talk about touring today, but obviously agents are very important, and I think in our industry there's a lot of things lacking. Let me say touring agents, artist managers, publicists, all these things weren't really there, so that is also something that we had to work on. And now, like, touring is also, given the type of music we make, we sell music on our Bandcamp, but we don't have millions of streams. So the way we make money is by touring. So we might have, let me say, for example, Duma is a metal band from Nairobi, or MC Yala, she's a hip-hop artist from Kenya. We have Kampire, that's a DJ from Uganda, and they're charging between $1,000 and $5,000 a show, you know, and going from festivals to smaller venues, and this is how they make their money. And obviously, making money in Europe, by the time it comes back to the continent, is worth much more. So that is a little bit how, for now, our economic model is put together, with touring as the end goal. And I always thought that, you know, when it's great to make music, but there's a market for music, right? And that market is going to validate whether your music is commercially viable or not. So we can tour and like pay ourselves to go and, you know, find little venues here and there, but I feel like it's only when someone on the other side of the world is ready to pay for your plane ticket, is ready to, you know, fly you over and charge, and audiences are ready to pay for a ticket, that makes economic sense. And once you reach that point, then there's a sort of market validation for, you know, your music. That means that somebody is ready to book you. And that's an important thing for us. We're really impact driven. That means that if that doesn't exist, that means you're doing something wrong, right? That means that either you're not promoting yourself enough, or the market has no interest in your music. And then you have to look at, where is your market? And I think that's a little bit what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, we will.
Is that, you know, where are people ready to listen to you? Where are your fans? And touring is very important in order to build fan bases, and that's why this, I think, is an interesting conversation to have for these kind of emerging markets.
And you've also focused on what you're doing locally as well. And before we talk a little bit more about that, to riff into touring, we'll watch a little bit of a video.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We're just going to stay seated right here.
Everyone from all walks of life being here, partying in peace, and just enjoying themselves, having fun.
That alone is the root, is the power.
It's a bit of a cliche, but I always believe that music has the power to bring people together.
People are open, expressive, the way they dress, the way they, you know, they dance, and everything is like, people be themselves, and that's a beautiful thing.
Getting to know each other, listening to music, arts, fashion, life, nature, everything.
Icyambere na mbere dusangira umunezero w'umuziki wacu twakuye i Burundi.
That's the site of the
Kodu?
festival.
Kodu means exchange. I think that's That's an ultimate word that explains what happens at the festival.
People's music tastes are extremely malleable. So even in a place like Uganda, where there was quite a tight kind of like music taste, we've seen over the last few years people embrace like more intense music and more variety. The more dialogue you have when it comes to music, I mean, the better it is, the more interchange there is.
All the kids that came also from Indonesia and China, that was great. Like, they were incredible. They played a lot of Gabber music, and we don't have it in Africa. Nobody listens to Gabber in Africa. So when the people are listening to this fast-paced music, and they bring it here, we're like, yes, man. Whew.
Particularly impressed by Nyege Nyege because they gave exposure to so many African artists we never even knew existed, and the kind of music that we'd never had a chance to listen to unless you dig really deep. And they did this without booking huge headliners, international headliners, which is like extremely remarkable.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. When are we going? When are we going, Derek? When are we all going? When's the next one?
September. If COVID allows,
Yeah.
then first weekend of September, you're all invited. Especially you that are here in the audience. I'll give you free tickets to everyone for coming. Sorry? Yeah. I
Free
won't
tickets
pay
to the whole
for
audience.
flights, but definitely, happy to share my contact and offer everybody a ticket to the festival.
No, there's the reason we want to show this is there's two really fascinating points in this, and this one around the exchange, the interchange, how important that is. You've done it within the collective, within the house that you have, bringing artists together, living together a longer period of time, but also how you emphasize that in touring and how, you know, local exchanges make the magic happen in a way. And then on the other hand, what she says at the end, right? Giving the exposure to the up and coming, what some might call tier 2, tier 3, maybe even tier 4 or 5 if they exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really programming broadly and giving an opportunity to young artists. Let's talk about that. Well, why is that so important for touring?
I mean, it's really important because the music market is very large. And when we only focus on the tier 1, then these are artists that will charge anywhere between $20,000 to $200,000. So naturally, that section is very small. So if you're talking about developing an entire economy, then you need to talk to, you know, a lot of the other artists that are, be it traditional music or be it, you know, hip hop or whatever it is, the music that you're making. I think it's very important for that bottom to be able to thrive, out of which eventually you will have these like big stars that will, you know, travel the world, and you will have a Beyonce or you will have a Drake or whatever else is, you know, your headliner. But for us, it's about economic development, right? And the economic development you get from focusing on that top level of artists. For example, in Uganda, we only bring like big African pop stars. So you have like Wizkid or Burna Boy or this one or that one, but this is not the economy. This is one part of the economy, but there's a whole other section that is also very important to develop, especially because it's out of this underground that everything else will start to blossom. And For example, here in Saudi, I'm really interested in bedroom producers, in up and coming, in the artists that don't really, they have the talents, but nobody pays attention to them. And unfortunately, it often happens that locally people disregard their own talents, and then they'll invite like all these international headliners without thinking that maybe actually there are musicians that are not that famous. Yesterday the lady from Sony, she said she booked an artist that had like 3,000 followers on Instagram as opposed to 200,000 followers. But now that artist that had 3,000, because of their talent and obviously some level of support, was able to make it where these other ones are now. So I think it's a very wise investment to invest in the diversity and the talent that you have at home, and also, unfortunately, sometimes to tap into other markets. And in Europe, for example, there's a section for everything. If you make noise music, experimental music, hip hop, whatever it is, the kind of music you make, there will be people interested in it. And that's something that we've realized. And over time, you try also to build that locally. But unfortunately, sometimes it happens that your fans are not at home. And that's okay, because music is something that really, goes beyond, your own sort of cultural or your own society. And sometimes you have to go and look for fans in Japan, or look for fans in Africa, or look for, different places. And yeah.
So let's fast forward a bit to what a touring model could look like, especially focused on the region, using some of your experience. Maybe you can weave in some of the notion of having these hubs, supercharging. I think you said supercharging promoters, supercharging.
I mean,
venues.
I saw the term supercharging. I love that term. Obviously, Saudi Arabia has the power right now to supercharge whatever it wants. So it needs to think like, okay, what is it that I want to supercharge? Do I want to supercharge a couple of like promoters for like mega events, or do I want to supercharge like local venues? Do I want to have a jazz club in Riyadh because I know there's like jazz musicians there that don't have a club? Do I want to supercharge, all these producers that need laptops, or do I want to supercharge, the youth by giving them like access to workshops or access to like studios? What is the level that you want to supercharge? And in my opinion, I believe in supercharging the bottom, because out of there, something can grow, rather than supercharging the top, which very quickly, unfortunately, becomes hyper commercial. So yes, it works, but how does it affect culture? How does it affect like the local economy? When an artist can make, let me say, 5,000 or riyals from a show, and they can have that, 2 shows a month, well, they can live off of that, right? And for them to wait until they can get to that 100,000 riyals for like a headline show at MDLBEAST, it's going to take a lot of time, especially when people start to get interested in just bringing international acts. So in that way, I think it's very important. Now, what do we have to do? First of all, you have to map the situation. Like earlier on, we were looking at a map and we were like, oh, by the way, how we're going to go to Yemen, how we're going to go to Libya, how we're going to go here, there, like there's a lot of places where there's actually not a possibility of touring. So, but the artists need to tour, and only to tour locally is good in order to build, sort of like community, in order to build a scene. And let me say, if there's DJs in Dubai, I'm sure they would be happy to come for 3 shows in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi DJs would also be happy to get booked in Dubai. So it's very important to develop nationally, then regionally, but eventually you want to have this touring circuit is also for us Africans, right? Like if we want to come and play this region, then it's great to see that there's a circuit. And then once we go and tour this circuit, we'll also meet other artists because we'll be playing on the same lineup with local artists. And then we'll be able to say, oh, maybe this Saudi DJ or this Tam Tam can come and do like 5 dates in East Africa, right? And that's also interesting for her because then she also builds up, new networks and new fan bases. So it's great to have a touring circuit, but every circuit needs to be connected to the other circuits, right? So that means that if a French, act wants to tour here, there should be a circuit. There should be an agent that says, oh yeah, you come. And because of that, then people here will also be able to tap into those touring circuits.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you just go round and round.
So how do you supercharge agents? How do you supercharge promoters?
I mean, you have to see what's lacking, you know, and I don't have, you know, the expertise right now to understand exactly what is missing, but obviously you need venues, right? If there's no venues, there's no possibility to tour. Then after these venues, they need to be open to things that are not necessarily known. So for example, if they're gonna charge tickets, then it starts to complicate things. So if we wanna supercharge them, then let's pay for the artist flights and the artist fees. This way, the venue will be happy because it doesn't cost them anything. And then agents are important, and promoters. Promoters are the one that are gonna make the poster, that are gonna call all their friends and tell the other friends, like, guys, come to my show. I've brought this artist from Morocco to come and perform here, or I've brought this artist from Palestine to come and perform. And over time, if we supercharge the promoters, that means that we're just gonna give them basically money in order to do that. And then for them it will be easy because they won't have to take a risk, you know, because the problem is, if I bring an artist that nobody knows here, who's gonna pay for a ticket for that? I'd be like, oh, I don't know that artist, you know, like, so you have to build a community and an audience, which then will start to trust you. You know, they'll be like, oh, actually, last party was great, I'm gonna come to the next party, even if I don't know who's on that lineup, you know, and that's where it becomes interesting. Then you need platforms, content platforms, for people to start discovering music. So you need to educate your audience in order to become curious. They shouldn't only go for what they know. And this is where everybody starts to work together. And you create a community, you create a party. You know, like,
Yeah, and more specifically, tell me why it's so important for, say, someone who's an up-and-coming artist here in Riyadh to perform with guys he knows in, or colleagues he knows in Cairo, or
because they will invite you back. You know, and that's why it's very important, I think, to build scenes. You know, and the scene is basically a lot of like musicians and audiences and people like to go to these events and venues that just have their things going. That means that once you have that, you can start to invite people. And if all these different scenes are being connected, then you can tour between these different scenes. And obviously, depending on the music, the scene is different, right? So there's a clubbing scene, but there's a live music scene, there's a traditional music scene, there's a hip-hop scene, there's like endless amount of scenes that need venues, for sure, and venues that are open to welcoming them. If I'm a rock band here, where do I go to play in Riyadh? You know, is there a place? Is there an audience? And if there's not, what do I do? Am I just gonna stop making music? No. So I have to build that scene. I have to see, like, how can I introduce music to the people here? How can I get them to like what I'm doing? How can I get their support? And once you get that locally, if at all possible, then you can start inviting people from other places in the region.
So how do we de-risk or supercharge the venues? How do we get to a, because I think when I look back home, the Netherlands has, in every city there's a pop hall, right? There's a concert hall. There's multiple venues maybe. How do we get to that situation? Because then, you know, if you're a smaller artist, you can hop around the smaller venues.
Yeah.
But how do we get to that situation? What do we need to do for venues?
Obviously they need equipment, right? If there's no proper equipment, a live venue is different than a DJ, sort of a club venue. So you need to look at, you know, if it's a club, do they have a good sound system? You know, like, and that is not that complicated. But again, the problem is always if I have a venue and it's working, why would I want to do something else? You know, like I have my same DJ that plays every single night and people come and they consume, my business is working, so why would I now all of a sudden get a pair of CDJs and start to bring like these other DJs? It's not going to change anything. So because of that economic, you need to incentivize them. And by taking away the risk, by making it not cost anything, then obviously they'll be fine, right? And then, for example, charging tickets. If a venue is full without charging tickets, why all of a sudden am I going to bring an artist that nobody knows and then on top of it I'll have a ticket? That venue will say, no, I'm not interested in this. And this is where, you know, the supercharging comes in, because you basically, for a time, paying for it. You know, if if you have that money, right? I mean, but this is what we're talking about here, right? I mean, everybody wants to invest in order to create an economy that revolves around music. So,
but it's in the littlest of things. Someone was saying to me earlier on that in Stockholm, every venue, every club is required to, at all times when they're open, have a bouncer in front of the door. That means if you during the day want to open up your venue so artists can practice and you can create some kind of community around your venue. That's why you need to have a bouncer in front of the door.
Yeah.
So it's in these very little things as well.
Yeah, and I think also now we're talking about venues, but the first night we went to the desert for an event, and there I met a guy from Dubai, and he said, in Dubai, every weekend we go to the desert and we put up a sound system, we put up a juice bar and a shisha bar, and we call our friends, we go to the desert and we party. And the last time he did one, over every hill was another party. So there's a huge desert here. So if you have a sound system that is readily available, then tomorrow we can go and throw a party. And the first time might be 20 people, but then after that there will be 50. After that there'll be 100. And I see already there's so many DJs, but where did these DJs get to play? I don't know where they get to play, but if you have these parties in the desert every weekend, they're gonna go, and they won't even ask for money. All they want is to play. That's a normal thing, and that's how you build a scene over time. So definitely access, and sound systems don't even have to be that big. Today there's small setups that are perfect for 200 people. And that's where you want to start. You don't need a function one to throw a party for 5,000 people all at once. You start with these smaller ones so that they can also grow organically. They can grow at their own pace with their own friends, and tell your friends to bring their friends to bring their friends, and then start to play different kind of music. And I think what's very important and what I'm very proud about our scene is that we're very encouraging. We don't tell you, if we don't know what you're playing, we don't tell you, oh, go and play this or go and play that, which people would get in other clubs, right? So you'd go, and even if you'd play African music, but not music from Uganda, there's always be this guy be like, hey, just put my phone there, I don't like your music, or this is this kind of music or that kind of music, and this is really problematic, right? Or if a girl gets on the decks and then there's a guy that is like, no, why should a girl be a DJ, this one and that one? So if you do it organically, then you can fix these problems as you go in your own way also, and I don't think any model needs to be imported. Of course, there's best practices, this worked there, let me try it out, but you gotta find your own voice and your own story in all of that.
Let's talk a little bit about your model. So the system that you've put in place to incubate, but also spread the music you're making throughout East Africa.
Yeah, I mean, our challenge was fundamentally an economic one, because our audience that was ready to pay for us to tour was in Europe, right? And that is something that, so our artists always, they want to play in Africa, but nobody's ready to pay for them to play in Africa, right? So it's a flight, it's a visa, this one and this one, so it's actually quite complicated. But now over time, for example, in Kenya, there's now this program, sort of supercharging program, where they've highlighted 5 venues in 5 cities in order to create this touring circuit within Kenya. That means that now the same thing is going to happen in Tanzania, the same is going to happen in Uganda, the same is going to happen in Rwanda. That means that on any given weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, a lineup of 5 artists can go and play. And I can go to Kenya and play for 5 shows.
And then go to Tanzania.
And exactly. Now, if I take the example of France, I can go to France and play 80 shows in a row, because they have this system where every city has its venue. If I go to China, China has 100 cities of more than 1 million people. So imagine what touring in China is like. And unfortunately, sometimes your own area is not enough developed economically that the touring is so little, and there's so many artists. So that is why it's very important to integrate that within other markets and to create appeal. So this is where these festivals becomes very important. If there's a festival that showcases all the artists from the region, and you also invite, I invite some Chinese bookers, I invite some French bookers, I invite this one, and people from the diaspora, etc. Then they will start to book you out.
Yeah.
And then having agents is very important. Who's going to promote your work? Who's going to book your tickets, your hotels, your visas? That's also a profession, and that's very important to have. But again, if there's no money there, then who's going to pay that agent to do all that work? Who's going to pay your manager when you're still like beginning, and you don't have any streams, and you don't have a label to sell your stuff, etc. So it's very difficult to go from A to B. But if you're ready to supercharge, we didn't get any supercharging, so it took us like a long time, but it worked because it was organic and we loved what we did and we believed in what we did and we worked really hard. But if you have a government that is going to say like, I'm going to help you out to accelerate this process, then things are going to move extremely fast.
So and it almost sounds like Saudi Arabia could even take this moment of transition to actually supercharge other markets around in the region as well, because that would come back to benefit.
Totally.
benefit
now,
the whole entire ecosystem, right?
Totally.
We're going to open up in a moment for questions. So
Yeah.
if you have questions, but just
I think one
please.
thing that I would advise to Saudi Arabia, if they have those means, and what is really missing, is a showcase festival for artists from the region. A lot of artists. And they have this in everywhere in the world. They have South by Southwest in the US, they have Midem in France, they have Womex, they have Access Festival, different showcase festivals. In Morocco, they have Visa for Musique. So what you do is
really about bringing underground above ground. Is that it? Showcasing young
it depends
talent,
a little bit. South by Southwest is already, you have to apply.
Huge.
There's like thousands that apply, and then they'll select like 200. But this is where everybody comes to book their acts. So if you want to supercharge that, you organize 1 week with like 5 stages, with workshops for the artists where they can also, network, interact, etc., and they can showcase. And then you invite all these delegates that are important delegates. They're festival organizers, they're agents, they're etc., venue owners. And you tell them, come and see my talent. Come and see how interesting and how diverse my region is. So then you're going to be like, oh, they invited me, they treated me very well. Let me invite this artist, because I think like this kind of music could work in my market, or this kind of music could work in my market. And that is how you supercharge the entire market.
Great, thank you. So questions. Are there questions from the audience? I know there's a couple at least. Looking around, who has a question? You've got a question. I know you've got a question. Anybody else? Let's see how many there are, and then we can... how about in the back? No? All right, let's start over here.
Very much for introducing us to your model with starting from zero. From a production point of view, when you just mentioned the African touring circus which you created, how would you guarantee that in all these little venues, in these undeveloped markets, supply what you need for your artists to perform properly when it comes to audio, but then also a bit more lights, maybe video, some more show elements? How would you guarantee that the quality of the production is there, so you don't have to carry all that with you?
Yeah, that depends on your means, obviously. Like, where's your starting point? And the guarantee is a technical writer that is respected. So if I say that this is what I need, let me say CDJs to perform, and if I come and there's no CDJs, then that's going to be an issue. But that means that these venues also have to understand what are the technical requirements in order to put together certain shows. But then again, you start with where you are, and then you try and improve that. And I think audiences also start to become more aware, and some artists, they can't perform on like controllers. So if you don't have a CDJ, I cannot come to your venue. And then when it comes to sound and lighting, obviously not every venue, this is where the supercharging comes in, right? If a venue has to see the economic benefit of having a great sound system, but if this kind of sound system requirement isn't there, and they're already filling in their club with a bad sound system, then what's going to incentivize that venue to do that? So I think it's really to raise the sort of, you have to raise the level of interest of the audience, and what do they require in order to come to your venue rather than another? And there's no yeah, you could have like controllers, you know, they go and check like, oh, what kind of sound system do you have, you know, et cetera, but it moves with the market. So in the beginning, for example, if I go to Tanzania, where we have a lot of artists from our roster that are also touring internationally, but when you see the kind of sound system that they have, it's like crap, you know, but you can rent it for $100. So that means that your party can be like $1, you know, and can still have 1,000 people and still pay and still sell drinks, et cetera, et cetera. So it needs to be adapted to the local situation, I think.
How about over there? Are you ready? Badr has the microphone. Yeah.
Hello. I want to ask about, because we've seen in the video you're playing very raw, beautiful, authentic sounds, and not, as you mentioned, not the commercial mainstream music. How do you find that sweet spot when you're exporting that music in Europe, for example? Let's say we have a very authentic Saudi DJ. How do you find that sweet spot in Europe or America or East Asia? Is it data driven? Is it how do you judge where to perform or where to tour next?
I mean, usually the sweet spot also finds you, but you have to create, you know, a community online. So if you put your music on SoundCloud, naturally people will start to, you know, interact. And then depending on the level of releases, like I believe that PR is very good because, you know, you can get into like magazines, let me say The Wire or Pitchfork or this one or that one. Then you can also try and see what are similar acts that play a sound that you relate to, and where are they touring, where are they going with this, and then to try out, you know, to maybe collaborate is also a good way to, you know, to see like, oh, if I do a collaboration with this artist, then maybe I'll get to tap into their fan base, and this is how I can, you know, develop my stuff. But I think it's also important to like know the market a little bit. And for example, you have Tomorrowland, and then you have Le Guess Who, or CTM, or Unsound. And those are festivals that are focused on emerging markets. So you'll find, for example, someone like Sote in Iran, or someone like, I don't know, Mazev Radio, or Al-Hara Radio. Those are also like really important platforms that promote this kind of music. And Al-Hara is based out of Palestine, Mazev is based out of Cairo, and if you listen to whatever is being played there, you will see like insane music from all over the region. And then bookers and agents are also interested in looking into that. And then when we go back to the supercharging, because that's like an interesting thing, there's a wallet behind you, then you have to say, look, why don't you help me fund my first tour? That means that all of a sudden, you're gonna talk to these promoters or these venues or those festivals, and you say, you don't even have to pay me. Just give me a slot, and I'll show you what I can do. Because my government is trying to encourage export. So they're going to pay for my plane tickets, and they're going to pay for a fee so that I can go. Because there's obviously, you might have like 3 shows. So economically, it becomes difficult because you have to stay in Europe for like a week between the shows. So that comes at a cost, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have that funding, it makes it helpful. And why do we have Nigerian music everywhere? Because the Nigerian government put billions of dollars into their industry. Why do we see like French artists going around everywhere? Because the French government is paying for it. You know, like, and all that non-commercial music, it is being supercharged by other governments because they believe that culture is very important, and they believe that other countries should recognize French culture, right? And that's why you have someone like Acid Arab, for example, that are like 2 French guys playing like sampling Arab music, you know, but that are touring like worldwide. Why? Because they get help from the French government. So, you know, there's a cultural quote-unquote warfare, you know, going on here, because every country is trying to promote their culture. It's trying to promote their artists. And you have to like sort of read, you know, what are the dynamics of that? And, you know, be able to sponsor your own so that they can also go out and create markets. And for example, Acid Arab is there, you know, but why aren't there like musicians from Cairo that are much better than those guys? Probably because the Egyptian government does not pay attention to those guys, and they don't realize that actually there's a market for them in Europe, there's a market for them in China. So the problem is that governments and people that are the ones spending the money, they just see that top one, you know, and they just see, oh, I want to have the next Beyonce, or I want to have the next David Guetta, and they don't realize that actually there's a whole market for like underground stuff, quote unquote underground, alternative or emerging,
And I know
whatever you want to call
that
it.
you're really eager to partner around creating those kind of underground, more young artists showcasing festival that you talked
And
about
quality,
a little bit earlier.
you know, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's quality. You know, I'm not saying like underground because of the sake of underground. I'm saying you have amazing talents, but why is nobody paying attention to you? Well, I want to find out why, and then we're gonna make, you know, we're gonna fix that.
I hope we have time for two more. I know there are two more questions. Let's go to you first. And we'll only have time for it if we keep the answers a little shorter.
Yeah, and I'll make it also a quick question. You said that all the governments are trying to subsidize and supercharge all their artists. On the other side, they're also cutting all their cultural spends and grants and subsidies to a lot of venues, etc. And in the post-COVID era, promoters don't really have a lot of backbone to bankroll all of these things. What are suggestions to supercharge those local scenes and get them interconnected if there is a lacking support from government for like the pop podia and stuff like that?
Like
the local venues in all those upcoming and emerging markets.
I mean, every market is, I guess, different, but I think what's important, if there is no COVID, right? If there is COVID, then people have to produce. People have to, like, you know, have access to studios so that they can make music, so that when it reopens, they have something to present. And you have to look at what are the points in the industry that are lacking. If you feel that there's not enough promoters, then these are the ones that need help. You know, maybe access the sound system. I think if, at least here, if you have a sound system, then you can throw a party. Then, so supercharging would means making sure that promoters have access to sound systems so that they can organize parties in the desert or different places, maybe house parties, or maybe when it comes to venues, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's complicated because if there's COVID, then the venues have to close, right? So if you want to help these venues, maybe looking at digital, you know, aspect of things. You know, maybe these venues can be like places where recordings can happen. Because, for example, if I want to make a proper like live stream, it's not that easy. I need equipment, I need good internet, I need a good setup. So a lot of these live streams become a bit shaky. If you would have like one space where you can have like 5-star sort of like live streams, and then you come, and you know the whole is set up, and a DJ comes, plays, and then he can live stream, and then promote himself on Facebook or like on Twitch or like on different places. So I think to create, find the thing that everybody's missing, and rather than giving it to everyone, have one that is really, really good and make it available to everyone. Right? So if it's going to be a venue, or if it's going to be a live stream platform, or whatever it's going to be, try and see that you can optimize these tools by making them available to as many people as possible. And for example, a studio could be open like 24/7, and you just get it. Like you just book your slot for like 2 hours, and then you go and you do what you want to do, rather than having everybody have a studio, for example.
I don't know if we're going to have time for a last question. Yeah, one or 2 minutes. Quick question over here.
The artists that you're working with, and it's all about sustainability, but mainly is it this? Because what you explained is like the whole ecosystem, the promoters, the venue owners, all of that. But is it focused on the artists themselves? And how big of a commitment, like, is it, like, are these artists casual? Because it seems like a tour, you're taking off, you're leaving and you're going. So it's people that are fully committed to this as a career. It's not like someone doing it casually. That's mainly the question. So, like, the talents you have are talents that are focused on making this their career. It's not just like I casually DJ or I enjoy doing this. And
I mean, that's also very important, and I really believe that we have to demystify the DJing. That means that if you listen to music that you don't find in the club and you don't know how to DJ, I'll be like, you come and see how you can play one track and then move to another track. And then over time, maybe you feel like, oh, actually somebody wants to pay me to DJ. Then maybe I'll make a career out of it. But I think it's very important for people that listen to a lot of music and that are bored by what's being played in the clubs, that they get a chance to play what they like. Because if you like it, someone else will. So it's also important for us, yeah. But obviously, we're trying to feed into the economic system, but also to empower diversity, right? And it's very important for all sorts of music to be able to have an outlet, because whatever you like, someone else also does. And if you don't find it, then someone else is also frustrated. So at some point, you gotta be like, okay, let me bring my 50 songs and play for 2 hours. And even if it's a bit shaky in the mixes, that doesn't matter, because the music will be so refreshing that it will be exciting. And plus, you'll play maybe other Saudi artists that nobody ever gets to hear. So the DJ in that way is a very important ambassador to all the music that is being made. If only the DJs, they play house music from America, how are they ever going to promote their own music? You need DJs that are going to fight for playing strictly, music from the region or from wherever. Yeah.
We didn't even have a chance to talk about all too much about your collective, the house you've created, this kind of integrated incubator that serves all these young artists. If you want to talk to Derek a little bit more about that or anything else, he'll be here for for the whole duration for the conference. And we're going to go straight into a workshop at 12 in the afternoon. What? 12:20? Are we pushing it back a little? 12:20, I'm understood. We're doing a workshop right after this, 12:20, around building your own sustainable touring agenda, focusing on what do you really need as an artist to thrive, or as a booker, what would make your life a lot easier, and how could we start creating a regional touring agenda, obviously with a focus on bottom up first. I think that's your key point here, cultivating a
what is already there. Yeah.
What is already there. Thanks. Thank you, Derek. It's been brilliant.
Thank you, Karim. Pleasure.
Wonderful.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for those that were there. I hope it was beneficial, and I'm looking forward to coming back next year and see how things develop.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.